Welcome to Motherhood Behind the Scenes. I'm Jennifer Norris Hale, the founder and director of Mission Motherhood. And in this series up to now, we've been talking with moms who have been sharing their vulnerable experiences with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and their journeys through that. And today we're going to kind of take a little bit of turn and make it something that we all might understand and have kind of carried along with us. Today we have my friend and I will say the backbone of this operation at the moment, Christie Sprunger, who has found herself in this gray area of having not experienced postpartum depression, but also dealing with the everyday difficulties and triumphs and challenges of motherhood. So I'm excited to have you here. I really feel like this is a fun area to talk about, and this is kind of what brings us all here, you know. And in our past, we might have, in my past, I have had, postpartum depression, but it's not my everyday anymore. And so, as we continue on as mothers, our everyday looks different every day, especially especially in the thickness of toddler season. So, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and where you're at, and we can go from there.
Yeah, when people ask about, when I tell people I have kids, the next thing I usually say is they're 5.5 and 2.5. And what I typically mean kind of behind those words is we are in the thick of it. And it's funny because sometimes people look at me like, oh, okay, you shared your children's ages. But moms who either have already surpassed those ages or who are also around those ages give me this very knowing look, because we're truly in the thick of it by way of like sibling rivalry and learning to play together. And 2 is such a magical age, but they go in and out of being the sweetest, most charismatic character to like a child I don't even recognize. So I usually say we're in a season of challenge and a lot of energy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I definitely understand that, and it can be exhausting. And one of the things that we've kind of even talked about as we become mothers or being on this journey is motherhood in theory and motherhood in actual practice. So we can have all the books and we can have all the apps and we can have everything that kind of like will tell us maybe what to do or how to manage it, but actually in the moment can be very different, and we don't talk about that very much.
Yeah. I think probably one of the toughest things for me about motherhood was the inability to become an expert in it quickly, because I'm still, nor will I probably ever be there. And so in my life up until the point of motherhood, if I wanted to learn something, I was really inquisitive. Let me read the book on it. Let me try to master this skill. So for instance, running. I remember I decided one day, like, I really think I'd love to be a runner. And I had maybe 3 or 4 goes at it. It didn't happen. But then eventually I did this like Couch to 5K program. And I can run a 5K. Not well, not fast, but I can do it. And so there's the sense of like, if I want to learn something or do something, maybe I do have the ability to kind of become a master at it. And then came along motherhood. Anybody who knows me intimately knows I'm a planner. I'm very much type A. I had all the books. I read them all. I had, checklists of things. I joked with somebody the other day, we even had a how to introduce your dogs to your baby book, because that was also on my list. And then when my daughter came along, there was just item after item that I was not prepared for, nor did I feel good at. Feeding, sleeping, right now discipline, even employing all of the methods that the books describe. I just feel like it's a learn as I go process, and I have to be okay with my own failure more than I am comfortable with.
And how did that, so as we become moms, especially with a mom who is a planner and who has the schedule, how did that, having your daughter and now your son, change your world?
In a lot of ways. And at the end of the day, all for the good. Even on the days when I tell myself it's more difficult. So for me, my kids have done 2 things. They've helped me live more intentionally and let go in a lot of ways. When people ask me about this, I think specifically about this decluttering challenge that I did, because that's my personality type. Over New Year's, there was this decluttering challenge, and people were supposed to post pictures of their home before and after, and there were little things like day one was decluttering your fridge and taking everything off the front of your fridge and the top of your fridge. And it was so interesting because there were so many moms in the group, and what I actually took away from it was other people's houses look like mine. There's clutter in the photos. Other people are living in their space. So often on social media, all of us have this inclination to portray the perfect photo. I'm guilty of this, and I know other moms have too. Shove all the toys into one corner, shove all the laundry into the other, and we'll just take this one photo in this clean space. And it's almost harmful to us as moms, because then my perception is everyone else's life is perfect and mine's a mess, when in actuality we're all living in the mess in a lot of ways, right?
Deeply.
And so I didn't declutter my house, and so that's just one of many kind of endeavors I set off, to do, but took away that other people are living in a space where they just need their house to be functional. We're not in a season of having like a spotless home. And ironically, although that seems really trivial, a lot of moms have had this conversation with me about their space in their homes and how difficult it was to go from having control over keeping their homes clean and tidy to having a child enter this space and struggling with, the inability to keep their space the way it was before, while still wanting their child, I said to somebody the other day, have, the ability to play and enjoy the space too, and they live there as well. And so that has been a struggle. I've let go. I've employed methods that work for us. Is my house spotless? Nope.
Nobody. Yeah. And unless you have I don't even, there is nothing to have in place of a childhood. In the old days, it might have been like you need to be seen, not heard type of a situation.
Yep.
But it's very, very much very different now. And I think conversations are changing as well into, allowing your kids to have their space gives you access to being a present parent as well. So you can engage with them in their natural habitat.
And that's that intentionality. That's absolutely, I feel that on a regular basis, because my kids will want to do something like go outside, and I'll look behind me at the living room, and my inclination is to say, this is my type A, we haven't picked up the toys that are inside yet. But instead of, and I used to, that was our task first. I have to stop myself and intentionally say, my kids want to play with me in this moment, so we're going to leave the mess because we have plenty of time to pick it up. And we're going to go outside and we're going to get muddy, we're going to get dirty, and we're going to have a good time, and those are the memories I want my kids to have from childhood.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because your inclination is to clean it up first. Well, I still haven't learned that. Where is my level of where's my level of accepting? I don't, if that makes sense. Like, the house will be a mess up to the point where I can't take it anymore, And so that's where, and then I'm like, okay, now we're all cleaning up. So where is that balance?
Absolutely. There's a threshold.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. And I'm like, okay, now.
I have one too, where if my house never meets my pre-motherhood threshold, I'll just say that, but I've become okay with it. And if we go way above the threshold where I start to get super stressed, my husband can sense it, and I'll come home the next day after work to dishwasher loaded, counters wiped down, house vacuumed, and that's been like a really intentional conversation between the two of us. I've said I've let go, and he knows that, even though I think he probably wishes I could let go some more. He knows that intentionally on his part, we just operate better if we can both give in a little bit. So,
one of the things too that we had kind of been talking about within that is you're not just a mom at home, but you're a mom at work too. Whereas your work might not follow you home. Sometimes in our day and age it might. But what does that look like for you?
Yeah. I want to caveat my answer by saying I know not everybody has. I see that what I'm about to say is a privilege, and it's taken a lot of practice and me becoming an advocate for myself to get here. My hope is that all employers will see mothers this way, but I know that we're gradually kind of running towards that goal. When I went back to work after becoming a mom, I found myself compartmentalizing my identity. So at home, I was a mom, even though I was still trying to check emails and do work-related things on the clock as a mom. And then I'd go to work, and it was almost like I left being a mom at home, and it just wasn't working for me. Because when you become a mom, that is your identity in almost every sense. It's not as if I can go to work and forget about my kids. They are first. I think about them, while at work all the time. And so one of the things I started doing, whether I was already in a position or being hired for a new position, was gently and appropriately making it clear that I'm a mom first. And so I want to set the expectation and the hope and mutual agreement that my family is really important to me, and while I'll always give 100% at work, I am a mom, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of my kids and my family coming first.
Yeah.
And I've been really pleasantly surprised with how people have responded. I even had somebody say once, I prefer to hire moms because their ability to multitask, prioritize, and get things done is unparalleled. And I thought, can I work for you for the rest of my life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've similarly had situations, well, I've had kind of both spectrum where when I first became a mom, I had already been at the company for a long time. They knew that that I was a hard worker, that I would get stuff done, and so I was fortunate to have flexibility in that. Although I was like, well, I don't want the flexibility because then that indicates that and then I have some type of privilege, or now I have to work harder to the messages that we tell ourselves. But I appreciated that opportunity, and then I've also had it where if I could just shift my hours a little bit, then I can pick up my kids earlier and we can have a longer day. And I had to justify that, and it blew my mind that shifting my work hours. This was pre-COVID.
Yep. When you knew
when
you're
I
going to
knew
get the same exact, if not more, accomplished.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if there are any employers listening, hire moms and be flexible.
Yeah, I think moms, we have this inclination to feel like we have to prove ourselves in the workplace because we're a mom. So I think, at least I had in my mind, this is what they're going to think as soon as they learn I'm a mom. They're going to think I have a lot on my plate, and am I going to be able to handle what's required of me at work? And I'm thinking, let me show you, let me prove to you how I can handle this and so much more, because I've learned that about myself as a mom.
Right.
The ability to do more than I ever thought was possible amidst all the struggles, right? Because it is definitely not sunshine and rainbows.
No.
Is what I wish employers would look at moms and think, is we really do a lot and can handle a lot more than that fear we bring to the table that I'm going to have to prove myself in this space because I'm a mom.
And the things that we do, you talked about like efficiency and multitasking, and that kind of brings me to the next point, which is, what we talk about and kind of hear about. I don't know, I say we, like generally speaking, but there is the invisible load of motherhood. And I preface that by saying I feel like this is something that we've always had, that mothers have always carried, but I don't think that we've had the words in previous generations to say this is what it is. Now we can name it, now we can call it out, and now we can work with it in a way that helps benefits families.
Absolutely.
How do we share that load together? So what do you? How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, so I still remember the first time emotional labor, which is exactly what you're talking about. It was a mom friend at work who said, have you heard of this? And she sent me an article, and it was about emotional labor. And both of us just sat there reading it like, this is our life. I can identify with this so much. There's so many unseen things and so much invisible work that goes into running a household that we just take on, and so do dads, right?
Yeah,
There's just
absolutely.
so much additional work to keeping a household running smoothly that flies under the radar and that people don't really account for. And sometimes I think we forget that we're doing all that as well. And taking a step back and realizing I'm putting all this intention and effort into this, I think it comes back around to like giving ourselves time and grace as well, because it is a lot of additional unseen, invisible labor.
Yeah, and expectations, even in like invisible expectations of, who's doing what, what's upcoming, what what the consequence of X, Y, and Z is.
Absolutely.
That we're always thinking out, and even having, supportive partners, it can be, still difficult to communicate. Even now that we just have the words and scenarios, now we have to like kind of understand what it means and put it into action as well.
Yeah.
So, I think so. We were talking earlier as well, and I feel like you just really resonate with a lot of moms, because just that's how motherhood is. Like, motherhood is universal, right? It's an individual experience, but it's a universal space to be in. And I think the difficulties every day that we have, or I say difficulties like it's begrudging, like, but but the days that we have, it is not an easy load to carry. Neither, and I always want to include fathers, because I know that fathers play an extremely important role by stepping up and being a part and being involved in their families, and supporting mothers, supporting their families. So I want to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah.
But motherhood as a whole, as it is individual, it is universal, and that's why it's so important that we normalize the fact that some days I do get frustrated, or sometimes it's hard for me to see something on Instagram where somebody's house looks nice and my house doesn't look nice, and while that might sit differently with you than it sits with me, like, it's still relevant,
Absolutely.
So if we've had, if we've experienced depression, or we've experienced these other conditions, the pieces of what make motherhood whole is just relatable by all moms.
Yeah.
And so when you talk, that's why these groups and just talking to moms is so important, because again, you don't know who you're going to connect with. Like, you don't know who has the same frustration as you do, who has the same scenario as you do, and how you guys can kind of work together and build your own little village and circle.
Yeah. And sometimes I hesitate to vocalize some of the things that feel difficult to me. I think you said it beautifully when we were chatting before. We're all in the trenches. Some people's trenches are deeper and look different, but we're all in there. And so sometimes I back up to give somebody space to talk about a really difficult experience they've had. And while it's not the same as my experience in terms of I wasn't diagnosed with PPD or anxiety, postpartum, but I definitely struggled with being a more depressed version of myself, struggling with my identity after becoming a mom and figuring out how to navigate a new space. But sometimes I think we don't always have a space where moms can come together and just say what they're thinking and feeling and feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah.
When I first became comfortable talking about things that otherwise I felt shameful even bringing to the table was when a mom friend of mine was like, you know what, I'm really struggling with the fact that I can't keep my house clean, or that I'm nervous about leaving the house because my son might have a tantrum, or that I haven't been out shopping aside from online shopping because I don't want to take my kids to the store. And I thought, I identify with all these things and would love to have space to talk about them, right? And so that's what this group has done for me, is given me space to identify with other moms and talk about what seems like the everyday ordinary experience, but that actually like de-stresses me quite a bit to be able to chat about with other moms.
And even just personally, I have different various groups of just friends who I know, like, okay, this is my group for X, Y, and Z. This is my group for X, Y, and Z. And some of them crossbreed, but I'm always communicating with them in memes at this point, because I think it gets across like the emotion, the situation, visually. That's a quick communication style that I have.
There's something about other moms that just get it. It just you can feel that they feel what you're feeling. Yesterday, in a conversation, somebody said, I get really irritable, and I thought, oh my gosh, I get really irritable, and it's a part of myself I don't love, but it exists, and I'm almost embarrassed and ashamed of it. But hearing another mom that is so graceful in the way that she presents herself say, like, I get really irritable at home with my kids, makes me feel normal, and it helps kind of shift the narrative that we see of motherhood looking a certain way on social media or sounding a certain way when we talk about it in public.
I was talking to a friend the other day too, the picture perfect kids, even one of my sons doesn't quite fully understand social media yet, because he's like, they get family pictures, why can't we do a good family picture? And I'm like, they took 30 pictures like that, like, and I'm trying to explain it to him. And I'm like, and second of all, you make a goofy face every time you take a picture. So
Yeah.
what are you what are we missing here? But if it's like, if you knew the back end of what it took for me to get 4 jittery boys to sit still for a photo, like, you know, we don't post that on social media.
Right. The end result does not portray the journey. I've actually struggled a lot with that. Because I know we're all exposed to a highlight reel of sorts with social media, and while people have become, and I appreciate this so much, a little more transparent and vulnerable in general on social media, I question myself sometimes. I don't want to post the photo that we worked so hard to get, because I know, I'm like, this doesn't really portray reality. And then I'm like, but I don't know if everybody wants to look at the 50 photos it took to get here. But just an acknowledgement, somewhere in the in-between, right? And so I've tried to become a little more authentic and vulnerable, even on social media, so that other moms get a snippet of, I want them to understand, no matter what I post, there's a lot behind the scenes.
Right.
I just don't always know how and where to put it out there, and that's this gray we're talking about. And that's why these conversations, I think, are important, to bring other moms into the space of discussing things that are relevant and difficult for them.
Yeah, because one high or one low might not be, you know, it's not comparable. Like, lows are not comparable, but you can meet moms in the middle. You can help each other up, and you know, that's what the whole purpose of all of this is to bring some transparency to what motherhood looks like for someone, to create a little bit more grace and understanding for all of us, to as we like enter into our, you know, daily lives, that, you know, that one moment of a Instagram reel or whatever, doesn't define. We can't make life choices and feel bad about ourselves or put ourselves down on a moment, you know.
Absolutely.
But hopefully those are changing, but I do feel like a lot of moms still feel that guilt or that pressure to be perfect.
Absolutely. It's even in the little things like getting out the door on time. I mean, that's a constant battle in our household. What it takes for us to leave on time, I have to pre-plan, and it does not always go that way. Picking our battles, you know, we were talking in a mom group about mismatched socks, or my daughter showing up at kindergarten in an outfit that just is absolutely ridiculous. But the piece that, you know, her teacher and the rest of the class doesn't see is that was a battle that morning that I just didn't have the energy or the time to pick.
And that's okay.
And you feel like you're going to be judged even for the trivial things.
Right.
But when you're a mom, when I see kids in mismatched outfits, I'm like, that mom does not pick her battles just like me.
I have even gotten to the point, well, not even to the point, like, if you want to wear jammies to school, you wear jammies to school. Like,
100%.
Totally fine with me. If you're comfortable and confident in your appearance and, you know, go for it, rock it. That's, again, not a battle that I'm going to fight. And those are important things, and those are things you learn along the way. Like, you throw that book out because that didn't work.
Exactly right.
And you start, you know, writing your own chapters as well. So kind of as we start to finish and wrap up, what has helped you in becoming a mom? So we talked a little bit about being intentional.
Yeah.
So how has that helped you in this whirlwind of chaos every day?
Yeah. So for me, something I'm constantly working on is, although I don't compartmentalize my identity between work and home because I bring, you know, mom with me wherever I go, it's being intentional when I am home with my kids. Because I'm a working mom, I'm away from my kids quite a bit. And so setting boundaries of, you know, and my boss knows this and he's great about it. Work stays at work unless there's an emergency. And so I typically try to stay off my devices while I'm home, and just be really intentional and present in the moment with my kids. Because as a lot of moms talk about, it's, what do they say,
days are long, but the years are short.
There you go. Yeah, I've heard it enough times that I should have it memorized or tattooed somewhere by now. But it's just being intentional about knowing the moments are fleeting and trying to soak them up while still giving myself space to say it's okay that I want this day to be over, this moment to be over, it's too much. And the other piece is, I think, having empathy for other moms. There's this notion of pre and post parent identity for myself. I just shared on social media and shared with other moms my son having a tantrum on the playground and me football carrying him off like the champ that I've grown to be.
Yes,
and being
won.
humiliated and humbled in the moment, but knowing like this is being a parent. There are 2 camps on this playground right now. There's people who just don't yet know or don't know because they haven't lived the experience. I'm getting a lot of stares. But then there's people who have been there and who are there who can empathize with me. So I need to show up like that for other parents when they're having those moments.
Right.
So parenthood has definitely been, it's taught me a lot, even outside of my identity as mom, and how to show up for other parents as well.
Right. And even thinking about it too, like in these first 5 years that you're in are so critical just in general. And then we move on and Heather was just saying after this, what is going to be the after this?
Yeah.
And just being in the moment with our kids and owning who we are and owning this piece of motherhood that we've, stepped into. It can be a very challenging thing, but it's important to have a support system around you, but also just owning who you are. And I think, again, I say this, you'd be surprised at who'll help you. You'd be surprised at da-da-da.
It's true, yeah.
You'll be surprised at what your employer will say when you ask for something, when you advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, there's strength in advocating. And part of that is owning this piece of season of life that you're in.
Yeah, I love that.
So I just appreciate you being here and sharing with us. I know that it is something that we've connected on, even after like a few years, like, oh, goodness gracious, we talk about all things, our kids and motherhood at this time, and just normalizing it for each other too. I think that's the best thing we can do in supporting each other. So I just really appreciate you being here and speaking to everyone who can relate, because we all can.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.